Hi, everybody. You know what time it is here in the mountains of Swain County. It is football playoff time as our Maroon Devils are getting ready for the second round of the state 2A playoffs. You know, Coach, we get a good first round bye. We'll talk more about the playoffs. Capping off the regular season, I know it was not a fun night here against the Murphy Bulldogs. Of course, we had so many guys who couldn't play, and not to make excuses, but that is a big, big part of the game when you don't have all your horses but two good football teams that night to wind up the regular season.
Yeah, you know, it was kind of a two different ball games in one. You know, first half we kind of traded possessions with Murphy, and it was 0-0 for the longest time. And then with about 6 minutes left in the half, you know, they punched one in, and you know, then we forced them to kick a field goal right there before the half and get good pressure and make the guy miss it. So it was one of those things where defensively, you know, I thought we played pretty good, you know, throughout the whole night. The one thing we didn't do a good job of is field position. You know, we started, you know, on our side of the 50 on defense every time but one in that first half. And, you know, and then the one time we didn't, they were on the 48, so they were pretty close anyway. So it's one of those things where, you know, we had talked about field position all week, and, you know, we didn't do a real good job of trying to flip the field and just couldn't ever get that going in the first half. And then in the second half at one point, you know, I know you mentioned, you know, we were down 8 guys, and that's not a good recipe to have. And so for us, you know, like seeing some of them young kids step in and play. Some of them played pretty good. Some of them made mistakes that, you know, young kids are going to make.
Sure,
that's part of the growing pain process. But you know, our kids never quit, and that's something that you know, we was real proud of their effort. You know, offensively, we got to do a better job moving the football. Got to get some stuff worked out there and just getting on some people. But, you know, hats off to Murphy. They're a really good football team.
They are.
You know, they fly around on defense. Offensively, they're dynamic enough where it's not just one guy. They got a couple, 2 or 3 guys that they get the ball to. You know, and in the end, you know, I told our guys we kind of let that one slip away at the end and kind of get out there to where we, you know, it wasn't manageable. But, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, we're not defined on what we did last week. We're defined on what we're going to do this week. And that's what we told our kids of, you know, regrouping last week during the bye week, first round of the playoffs, try to get some guys healthy, you know, try to fix some mistakes that we can fix, work on things that showed up in that game. But it's just one of those things where, you know, when it don't go your way, you know, how do you respond?
Right.
You know, it's real easy to come to practice on Monday when you win, you know, and our kids showed up, and we had a real good off week, you know, getting some things fixed and just working on us getting better. You know, but always proud of our kids' effort, and you know, moving forward, you know, we're going to have some of those guys step up, and it's always good when you can get them some time. I'd just like to spread it out a little bit, and not have to play 8 guys at once, you know, that haven't been in those starting roles before, you know, that game. So, but it is what it is. You know, that's why we coach, and you know, that's why kids show up to practice to get to play, and they got to be ready.
Yeah, you know, and I think that says a lot about the Smoky Mountain Conference, Coach. A lot of teams still in the playoffs in the 1A and the 2A, and of course we've moved up this year to the 2A, and we get a first round bye. I think again that kind of applauds the success of the conference, and it is a tough conference. It's very physical, and talking about being physical, I know we've had a week off, and I hope some of our kids have healed up some, because I know, especially if you're a senior, man, you really want to play, and I'm sure you can see it in their face. They want to play, but on the flip side of that, you got to be careful with these guys that are banged up, I'm sure.
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things that you know, when you get to this point in the season, you know, it's win or go home. Yeah. And, you know, our kids, they've done a real good job in this week's preparation for our game of, you know, being focused. You know, I think when you get to this time of year, the teams that can make a run are the teams that when you show up to practice, you don't have to really motivate them. They're locked in, they're ready to go, they're focused, they stay sharp, they stay hungry, and that's the teams that make a push in the playoffs. And our guys have been locked in. They've done a real good job of studying film and diving into that scout report. And it's one of those things where for us, I think our guys understand that if you don't win on Friday night, you don't get next Friday, and that's senior leadership. That says a lot about our senior class. Of they don't want to be done playing, and this is a pretty special group, and they're fun to be around. They're fun to coach, and we don't want it to be. We don't want it to be over. We want to keep playing, and that's the goal I think for everybody that gets in the playoffs is how long can you play? So.
It's going to be fun. Fans, stay tuned. We'll come back and take a look at those Spartans that we're going to be tangling with this Friday night right here on the Maroon Devils Network, so stick around. Coach, as you know, looking at the film, a very good team coming to Swain County High School. We get to host here in the second round. It's, it may be one of the tightest games, I think, in any level of the playoffs. You look at some of the numbers anyway. We're a number 8 seed. They're a number 9 seed. I was looking at the latest RPI. I think we're number 7. They may be number 8. So this community school of Davidson from down around Davidson College, not too far out of Charlotte. But, very good football team, and we're going to have our hands full on Friday, aren't we?
Yeah, they're very explosive on offense. They've really got a big play ability on that side of the football. Got a kid at quarterback, Sigler kid, that does a real good job distributing the ball to those kids. And the Johnson kid that lines up at receiver, he'll come back in and play some quarterback some and wildcat, get him in the backfield. He's one of their guys. They just try to get the ball to him somewhere, somehow. So it's one of those things where they got a couple different running backs that they like to play, and it's just they are very, very dynamic in what they do on offense, and they like to spread the ball out and get it in the air and make you have to play in space on defense. And it's going to be real important for our guys to rally to the football, pursue the football to correct angle, and tackle well when we get there, because you watch their film and they're able to go the distance. They got some guys that can run, and if you give them that opportunity, they're going to be pretty good at getting those big plays. They've done it all year. You look at their schedule, at what they played, a pretty tough schedule, and some of their teams that they've played that are still in the playoffs. Forest Hills is a real good football team that they played early on. It was a close game. Played Corvian 3 or 4 weeks ago, lost by 1. So that's a good opponent that they've played, and so you look at kind of what they've done in their body of work throughout the season is, they're a pretty good football team. And
no doubt. I
think a lot of people, just because it's not a known name in 1A or 2A football, they might take them lightly. We turned on the film first time, and our kids, they understood what we were up against. You watch them. And the thing is, they fly around on defense, special teams. They've got a really good kicker who can, he does a lot of his kickoffs go in the end zone. So, they're really good in that department. He kicked a 49-yard field goal at one point this season. And so for us, we can't let them get too close, so they're going to get 3, So that's the thing with us defensively is we got to, keep them on their side of the field and not ours. And it's just one of those things where they just got so many weapons offensively. They fly around on defense. They get after you. They're pretty physical, aggressive, It's kind of what, when you turn on the film, you watch them and you're like, oh, they pretty doggone good football team.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
The Albert kid, he plays kind of like their tight end, inside slot, defensive end. He's really, really aggressive. He's a very active in their defensive plan and gets in the backfield, causes a little chaos. And so those are just, things that we have to combat. We got to get ready to go play a physical, sound, fundamentally football game and against a team that, if you don't tackle well, they're going to go. I'm just telling you, they can run. They got a lot of guys that they get the ball to. And, quarterback does a real good job of just getting rid of it and throwing it to his guys. And so we're going to have to do a real good job in the secondary, in our coverage and try to disguise some things maybe possibly just to kind of change his viewpoint and create a little confusion in that department. But for us offensively, we got to sustain drives, get first downs, eat the clock. That's going to be big for us is just keep their offense off the field, and that's one of those things I think we try to do every week. I always tell our coaching staff if we have the football, they don't, and so that plan's going to kind of just continue. We want to stay on the field offensively, create first downs, and we got to be pretty efficient and go score when we have the football because, Community School of Davidson, they're going to do a real good job, and they've got that ability to go score a bunch of points. And so we need to limit that. But it's an exciting time for our kids. Good opponent that we feel like has a chance to be very competitive, and we got to play good and be competitive. Good thing is we're at home. We need all those Maroon Devil fans to show up Friday night. And be on the fence and pack these stands and support these kids because there's nothing like playoffs, especially in Swain County.
No doubt. And, Coach, they play in a tough conference. They're in a kind of unusual situation. They play in a 2A, 3A, 4A conference, as you mentioned, Forest Hills, who's coming up to Cherokee to play Franklin Friday. But you're right, a wide-open offense that we're not really used to seeing. They don't run it like a lot of the teams in our conference. But you're right, that 12th man got to be here. The weather's going to be a little better. I know we saw snow earlier in the week, but looks like a great night for football.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I tell our kids, we're so blessed where we play.
Yeah.
And I tell them there's no better spot than Memorial Stadium, Boys Dietz Field, and especially in the playoffs because it means a little more. I think it's important for everybody. Here, I think it just means a little more.
It does.
And it's one of those things, and people probably say, well, you're just saying that. Playoff time in Swain County is a big deal. And,
it is.
We want to, continue the traditions that we have here of making deep playoff runs. And, there's been some really good football games played here in November. And, I think Friday night's going to be another chance for us to, play in one of those big ball games. And, I feel good about our kids, though. I feel confident in how they've practiced and how they've prepared. And, we're just going to go out there and line up and see what happens. And, that's the biggest thing with this group is I trust their effort. And I trust their abilities that if they know what to do, they're going to go do it. And so that's just for us. That's kind of how we've took every week is, we're going to show up, do our job, and see where the chips fall.
No doubt. Fans, the tradition. We have the tradition, our fans, our conference, our players and coaches. And, hey, that tradition is going to continue right here. We need you to be here Friday night. Join us for all the broadcast activity right here on the Maroon Devils Network.